Welcome back to part 2 of this build. In this episode, we're going to be talking about this thing, the helmet. This is one of 3 helmets that the Scab Captain wears in Darktide, and in my opinion, this is the coolest of them all. So, let's get building. So up next is the helmet. Just like every other time I've made a helmet, these are my 2 favorite tools, some aluminum foil and some plastic wrap, another duct tape template. A couple methods for this. I always keep my hat on for this. Help makes it a lot easier to take the whole thing off when I'm done. Only main reason I use aluminum foil is to add a little bit of extra bulk to my casting. Main reason being, this stuff is very form-fitting, and then when you go to do your foam, that's also thick, so it tends to shrink things a little bit, so aluminum foil helps kind of bring that out some. So, let's begin. Okay, I look like a dork, I know. So up next, I'm doing this. So normally the way I do this for my helmets is I'll just do 1/2. But the way this helmet is designed, the very center is one piece, and then there's about a 45-degree angle on the side, and then here. So just to make sure, I'm probably gonna just do the whole thing and then figure it out from there. I would like to say that duct tape is probably the worst tape on the planet, but it is great for this stuff because it has very little hold. It's cheap, real flexible, which is great for casting and making molds. I go to tape for every kind of pattern making I make when it comes to freehanding. Be it my Warhammer suits or whatever. We're out of tape. Which is good because I used my very last piece. Now here, I just slit my throat, and I'm free. Except for all the tape that extended past. Oh, it got all of my hair. Oh, this is gonna suck. Okay, separated. Oops. There we go. Nice little cast of my head. This will do. I will probably put it back on just to get some ideas for markings. Now to draw. Alright, so even though I am not doing the top centerpiece as a 2-piece, I am going to still find my center line. So it does not look like 3-piece, it looks like just 2. So the center cap and the sides, but there's about a 45-ish degree angle there. So I'll just have to probably follow from here and go out. Now, obviously these lines are not going to match up. I'm just eyeballing some ideas. This will end up eventually getting transferred to paper first, and then after that I'll make some mock-ups and get some ideas. And then when I go to make my paper template, probably going to cut the center in half and then find a way to flip it and then mold that into one piece. Worst case scenario, I'll sand it and stuff smooth so that it looks like it's one piece if I must, because that is quite a bend that you are not going to get in one, so it's probably going to be two anyway. So either way, I guess I am using half of this. That's fine. One thing left now I need to do is to start figuring out the side. It's going to go from jawline back to the back. Probably would make more sense if I did this with the armor on, because the way all that's working is everything's going to be almost flush with the neck guard and then gorget in front and all that stuff. It's all going to flow together, so I'm going to work on that chin line with the chest piece on. As you can see right here, I'm very limited in that movement. So if I gotta bring my head down, this is as far down as my head can go. I'm expecting some good audio quality out of this. All my audio is probably echoing right now. So that there, I have an idea of how far this chin line will go. I'm just going to trace this to get an idea of where it's at its lowest. And then follow my chin line. That should give me a general idea what I need. Pop it off and take a look. Yeah, okay. We're good. And this will be good to start cutting out and transferring to paper and making a quick template to get an idea of all that stuff. Or I'll wing it and just go straight to foam. It's usually not a good idea to do. So paper it is. And with the cast made, I used that to create my helmet's template. I cut the right piece separate, and I removed the excess material inside. I then focused on cleaning up my lines in the top and side where the helmet will be joined. On the in-game model, this is a noticeable bend. While not exactly a 45, it is a noticeable peak that defines the top and sides. Once I had what I needed, including registration marks, I cut those pieces separate and began transferring them to cardstock to create a cleaner template for myself. For the side, I needed the piece to lay flat to the template, so I made several slits in the duct tape template to flatten it out. When transferring this back to foam, these slits will help pull that foam back to the rounded shape that the template originally had. And with that all traced and cut out, it came time to transfer it to foam. I used 10mm sheet foam for this. Originally I wanted to use 5, but I wanted that extra weight and support to offset the weight of the horn that'll be on the visor. I used a silver marker on black foam. These are a little more expensive than black Sharpies and tend to dry out a lot quicker, but I prefer to use black EVA foam over white because I know that if I accidentally scrape off any paint later on, the black foam underneath, it wouldn't be noticeable. With everything traced out, I cut the foam out. The top two pieces all used straight cuts, and the side pieces were given an angle cut where it joined with the top, to give it that slight 45-degree angle. With that all cut out, I gave everything a layer of contact cement, waited until it was all dried, and then pressed those pieces together. Once I connected the top and sides, I gave it a quick test fit to make sure it fit right. And I noticed it was a little lower on my jawline than I wanted, so I marked it with some tape and trimmed that down. Up next, I brought up my heat gun to help bring out the rounded bulge that the top and sides need. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight heat gun. A hairdryer can work just as well. For this, I just lightly heated up the inside of the helmet to help loosen up the foam. And with its current seams already holding tension, my theory was that this would allow those three sides to relax and find their most stress-free spot, which would be to round out. And my theory was correct. The top and sides were now rounded. Up next came time to mock up the visor. I used some scrap paper and traced out my face's profile, and got an idea of how far the visor needed to be out to clear my nose.
Okay, so the basic shape of the helmet is done. Not a whole lot to it. It's pretty simple, actually. In the end, I probably will be cutting a large knot out of this to make up all the mounting hardware for the tubes and stuff that kind of wrap around. I do need to clean it up still, but I can do that later before I start adding details and all the other stuff. That I can push that off a little bit. Up next, I'm going to be doing the visor. I kind of did a rough sketch already for how I want it to stick out. I'm going to have to revise this a couple times. It's going to be kind of not super difficult, but it is a simple shape. But at the same time, I don't really have anything to make a mold out of it unless I get creative and start mixing up some cardboard and aluminum foil to make a cast out of it to then make, you know what I mean? So I'm going to play this by ear and try and make it out of paper, do maybe a mock run, see if it works okay. I like what I got, then I'll transfer it to foam. Not 100% sure what I'll use yet. The base head was 10mm foam, mostly because I needed to be sturdy to kind of like act almost as a counterweight to everything that's going to be in the front. But I don't want that same kind of weight in the front. But I feel like 5mm might be a little too thin. I don't have anything in between, but that's where we're at. And I don't know. Find out. You wing it until you finally get what you need. I guess that's how I do it.
And so began the template process. I put the helmet back on and marked where my ears were to get kind of an idea of a center line for the helmet side profile. And then using my reference images, I started drawing out where I felt the visor's side trim would line up, along with other details like the recessed portion in the lower back of the helmet. I then went back to my cardstock paper and began working on a more accurate side profile for the visor. Once I had what felt right, I doubled it and taped it to the sides of the helmet, and then started working on figuring out the shape and bevel of the front portion. This will take several attempts just to get it right.
So we have our first mock-up of this shield on the face. I kind of want to talk about this a little bit, just to kind of give you a general idea of how this goes. So, first things first, this is not good. This is not what I want, and I wasn't expecting that. This is usually how these mock-ups tend to go. Very first round is just your rough draft. Looking at this, I got fairly close. I got some of the shapes down, but proportions aren't where I want them. You can see on my side here, I have basically the concept art of the helmet. I ripped this off of ArtStation from one of the actual concept artists that did the helmet for the game. And from what I can tell here, if I zoom in real close, comparing this and that, the first major notice I see is right down here on the center, probably about this much. That all needs to come in. If anything, it needs to sink in and swoop back out. That's going to be an easy fix. Center isn't that bad, but what I don't like is how flat this part here is. I want this to bulge out a little bit more. So I'm gonna have to also address that. So other than that, side seems okay for now. I'll wait until the second round to see if that needs adjusted. There's my first two major things I need to adjust. I'll be cutting this up, drawing on it, cutting it out, retaping it, then putting it back together, getting a general idea of what I have. And this is probably gonna take probably 3 passes to finally get what I want, maybe 4 to really fine tune it. It depends on how good the next 2 rounds go. But we got pretty close in the first one. As they say, trust the process. Never stop until you're satisfied. Unless you have a deadline like me, and then you have to stop at some point. Otherwise, you'll never finish. All right, back to work.
So I did just that. I marked on the sides where I needed the lower portion brought in, and then I split the top down the middle so that I could fit in a new piece of paper to hopefully create that bulge in the top center that I wanted. I then cut that front piece free and refined my template. Once I fixed the issues I had, I taped it back to the side pieces to see how it looked all together.
All right, second pass looks a lot better. We're getting a lot closer. Probably one more pass to go of adjustments and we'll be exactly where we want. Our front is now getting more narrow, which is what we want. Looks like I might just need to bring this in just a tiny bit and maybe just a little bit right here. This, it's hard to say. Maybe the whole thing needs to come in just a tiny little bit. And then other than that, I might work on adjusting this as well. Not much though. So yeah, getting very close on this. I think one more pass might get us where we want. And if it doesn't, it's gonna get us insanely close.
With one more pass of adjustments, we were getting a lot closer to what I wanted. I grabbed my chest piece and mocked the helmet up on it to get an idea of the side profile, to make sure that it looked good around the gorget. Which it did, and then I tried it on myself to see how it looked. It still seemed a little bit off, so I gave it one more pass of adjustments, fixing the top portion, and then finally transferring it all to foam. Once it was all glued together, I taped it onto the helmet and gave it one more test fit with the chest to see how it looked.
Yeah, so still needs work. First things first, 5mm is fine for this. I was hesitant to just go straight 5 because I don't have any 2 or 3mm like I thought, so I can't laminate it. So 5mm is what I have to use, and that's okay. The thickness is fine. But this front is still way too wide, and it's not giving me the shape that I want. So back to the drawing board, the literal drawing board.
So came time for yet another pass at the visor template. The bulge I tried to address up top was now way too wide, so I taped the old template onto the visor, traced out how much I needed to bring things in, traced out a new template, transferred that to foam, glued it all together, and tried it on again.
So how did round 2 go? A lot better. A couple major changes I did to this from the last one. I was really winging it this time, and I didn't even try putting together the paper template before I did this. I just went straight to foam and crossed my fingers, and it turned out actually pretty good. So what I did, I brought in the center. So I added more to the middle. What this did, it brought the center peak out a lot more. That made that center point a lot more pronounced. Another thing I did was that I brought in the sides to make it more narrow. So I was kind of trading what I had here on the sides for what I had in the middle. Shrunk the whole thing in, brought it out. Looks good. Next thing I did, I almost failed this, but what I did was the last 2 times I tried this, I was going for a full 90-degree angle. So what that meant was that I had a 45-degree cut on this side and a 45-degree cut on this side. That kind of screwed me up a little bit because that made this completely flat. So instead this time I went for a flat side on one and an angle cut in the other. That gave me a 45-degree cut. Now, that's going to get, because of the way this kind of curves, these sides are going to kind of wrap around it. So that kind of like helps hold that shape and then go into it, giving it a much better look. Kind of looks almost like a Karnak twin helmet. But anyway, this is good. I pre-drilled some holes in the helmet. These are the holes that are going to be in the helmet. They will be bigger in the end, but I just pre-drilled them now just to get them exactly where I want them. I kind of did some quick guessing on the template, punched them out and marked it out, and got them with my Dremel. They will be bigger. I can actually see out of these holes a little bit. I'll be able to see out of them a lot more in the end. Not to mention that the helmet will have a giant lens on the left eye, so I'll be kind of having the vision of an emo kid, you know, you can't see out of your one eye because your hair's in the other one. This is gonna be the same way. I'll be able to see a little bit out of the one eye, but not a lot. Hopefully making the holes bigger will fix that. We'll find out. But either way, with the one lens and the little holes, that'll help. It'll also help dissipate heat, let me breathe better. But yeah, I'm happy with this. So up next, I will start cleaning up, decorating all of these pieces. That will be a ton of spikes. I'll have to cut this entire section out that I had already kind of traced out here. I'll have like a 5mm recessed piece similar to this on the inside, and then there'll be a box in the back where all the tubes will then come and wrap into the side of the helmet. It's gonna be fun. This is probably the part I'm looking forward to the most in the entire build, really. Usually not a good idea for me to kind of build this stuff first, but doing it gets me excited, and me getting excited is a good thing because that keeps me motivated to keep working on this stuff. So, back to work. Quick note before I go back to work, by the way. It has been asked in my previous videos, especially my Warhammer one, like, will I be saving my templates? Can I share my templates that I make, all these handmade templates? Usually when it comes to this kind of stuff, the answer is no. And the main reason being is because I go through so many iterations of adjustments and stuff, but by the time I'm done, the template that I had made is already like cut to hell and back, and there's not that much I can do to save it. Case in point, I try to sometimes, but it's not always guaranteed, and in this case, it's going to be a no. It's kind of hard to explain. I do try and hang on to these at least for a little bit throughout the build in case I have to backtrack any. But yeah, in case anyone asks, that's usually going to be the answer. Not because I don't want to, but because I do all this freehand. There's so much cutting, changing, that sometimes even the template I have isn't going to be the end result that ends up on the foam. Just is what it is, I guess. And I apologize.
Up next is a detail. I started with the trim on the visor, using some painter's tape. I drew out the lines of where the trim would go, and then transferred that to 5mm foam, and glued that onto the visor. After gluing the trim, I brought up my Dremel and used its end to dig out circles for the holes in the visor to be cut out later. I then cleaned up the edges on the trim, and then cleaned up the seams on the outside of the visor, and all the seams on the helmet too. Once that was all cleaned up, I went back to the holes in the visor and used my X-Acto knife to cut out all the little holes. Once they were all cut out, I took my sanding bit and cleaned up the edges of those holes and gave them a mild bevel. I cut out the back trim and replaced it with 5mm foam so that it was recessed. After gluing that on, I marked and glued the sides of the helmet and bolted the visor into its permanent position. From there, I started working on the fake buckles that help hold the visor on. I used painter's tape again to lay out the path and shape of the strips and transferred that to foam. This was 2mm foam for the strips and 5mm foam for the buckles themselves. And with some contact cement, I attached them to the helmet. Up next were the helmet spikes. These came in various shapes, sizes, and thicknesses. I took some 10mm foam and cut out a ton of triangles. Tried my best using my reference images to get each spike as accurate as possible to what was on the in-game helmet. Each spike was made up of 3 to 4 layers of 10mm foam, cut to shape, and sanded smooth. Doing this one spike at a time to ensure that each one was glued in the right spot and was as accurate as possible in shape. With those all glued on, I began tracing out circular objects to start mocking up the placement of the lenses on the visor.
Alright, so I have no idea where we left off. It's now the weekend again. I can't remember what I actually did or did not talk about, so I'll do a quick rundown of where I'm at so far. So far I have built the base helmet, the visor, which took several revisions to do to get right. So then we got our little spikes. I mostly took the best guesses I could from the images that I had. The angles of the spikes aren't the best. I could make them a little more curled, but it's too late for that. Used some 2mm foam to make these straps. The belt buckles are, I believe, 5mm foam cut out in squares with a little piece in the center, and then I just ran it through like you would a normal belt buckle. Up next, I had a couple options to do, but I didn't want to do any of this stuff here on the face until I had all the tubes done, which meant I had to do the block in the back, but I didn't want to do that until I had foam dowels that I needed for the hoses on the side. So the hoses on the side were the biggest setback I had on the last day of last weekend. But yeah, I couldn't do any of that until I had those, because if I made anything too big or too small, and I kind of just wasted my time. So I just went upstairs and started working on some episodes like what you're watching right now. So anyway, Monday morning I went to the store looking for foam dowels. First stop was Hobby Lobby, mostly because a lot of the black foam I'm using now is from them, and locally the only two places I can get foam and foam dowels is Hobby Lobby and Michael's. As much as I don't like Hobby Lobby, their foam is actually really good quality, at least when compared to Michael's. So I went to Hobby Lobby first. All they had was this, I believe these are 15mm dowels, which is fine. I can use these for 1, maybe 2 of the hoses on this. But as for the bigger ones, the ones that were actually holding me up, I need something bigger. So reluctantly, I went to Michael's, and they had everything exactly what I needed. They had 30mm dowels. So these are going to pretty much do the trick. I normally don't like Michael's foam because of how gummy it is. That's the best description I can think of for its texture. I've never really used their dowels though. These seem a little stiffer, so that's good, I guess. I'm hoping that this gets me what I need. I bought 2 just in case. I didn't know if 1 would be enough. Yeah, it looks like probably 2 was a good idea. But yeah, that's going to be our goal first. Now that we know how thick this is, I'll start with the box in the back that houses these, and then I'll start hooking these up, getting them to shape. I'll have to do a little bit of work to them to make them look appropriate for the hoses and stuff, but that's where we're at.
Now that I had the dowels that I needed, I knew how big I could make the box in the back of the helmet. This was 10mm foam, mostly so that it could hold the large dowel without warping from any tension it might have. It was a little complicated in shape, with the top and back surfaces having exposed plating and recessed bits with vents. So it was a lot of work for such a small little piece, but I managed to get it done and glued onto the back of the helmet. I then glued the large dowels directly onto the holes in the side of the box, and started working on figuring out the length and position the hose needed to be to fit in the sides of the visor. I also marked where I wanted them to connect to the visor and cut those portions out. With those holes cut, I shoved the dowels inside and cut off the excess from the inside, still leaving an extra inch or 2 just in case I needed to pull it back out. I then taped everything in place and brought out my heat gun to help force the dowels into its current shape. Before permanently attaching the front, I marked out grooves in the hose and cut a thin slice with my X-Acto knife along those lines. Once they were cut, I used my heat gun again on those slices to open them up wider, making them a little bit more pronounced. This little extra give will also help the dowels bend in those tight turns at the front and back of the helmet. And from there, I started working on a second hose on the left side using a thinner dowel. This would run from the bottom of the box in the back, alongside the larger dowel, and up the top side of the visor. This hose is kind of a corrugated design with triangular peaks. To make this, I cut out a ridiculous amount of triangles in 5mm foam, figuring out how long they needed to be to wrap around the dowel, and then used an overlapping angle cut so that they can hold better and be more seamless. And after every piece was cut to size, came the long and tedious process of gluing every single piece.
I swear sometimes I question my own insanity when it comes to doing this crap. I probably could have done this any other way that would have been better, easier, more time efficient, you name it. But this was the effect that I wanted. I cut out way more pieces than I really needed to, but that's fine because I'd rather have too many than not enough.
This was insanely tedious. I had to pretty much glue one side, let it dry, pick it up, glue the other side, these things. Otherwise, I've gotten glue all over my hands, and that would have been a complete disaster when trying to pick up literally anything. But that's fine because there was like hundreds of these things, or at least 100 of these things. I don't know how many there were, I didn't count. I just went crazy until I felt like I had enough. So this was the biggest assembly line process I had done in a while. Some of these are longer than they need to be. Let me show you. You can see on the ends here, if I can get it just right, the ends are angled. That is so that when they overlap, that one can grab onto the other, and it makes a much stronger bond. Makes it easier to wrap these two. Makes it look a little more, can I get this? Can't really see it too well. You can see there's a seam obviously, but makes it easier to overlap and then still hold the shape. If you just went flat cut to flat cut up against each other, it wouldn't have held as easily and been more likely to break apart. This way, when I go to bend this thing in the end to fit on here, there's less of a chance of this to rip because there's way more surface area holding. So there's that. Alright, that makes all of these extras that can go away. So I already have my holes pre-drilled. Before I go into this, let me explain what's going on here. So these are still not permanently attached in the front. What I had done, I had a couple ways to go about this, and I figured the easiest way was to measure out how far each break in the line is supposed to be, and then just score it. And then after I scored everything and started putting everything in place, took the heat gun, and that would take that cut and open it up. So as a result, it's not perfect and clean, but you can kind of see that there is a now separation. So when it gets painted and all that stuff, these gaps will be more pronounced and you'll be able to see them a little better, especially once I go to paint them. That cavity will then be able to stay black when I go to paint. And it looks like a copper-ish color onto these, then that crack will stay black and you'll be able to tell better that there's a gap there. As far as this goes, I think this is supposed to clip into the bottom here like so, and this wraps it up underneath here and goes into the side there, just like so. So we'll have to get bent a little bit, probably like that. I don't know. I'll have to figure something out, but that's fine because then that gets us this here. It's the exact kind of texture that I wanted. That's good. I'll make sure I kind of twist everything around to try and hide all the seams as much as possible from into the inside. That way it's less noticeable. But whew, what a headache. I did draw out where the eyelets and stuff are going to go. This is going to be closed, this one will be opened, and this one will be too high for me to see unless I want to look up. But that's okay because I can actually see out of all of these pretty decent, so that's cool. I still need to do the one on this side, start doing some doodads. I'm probably going to take a break at this point because that was exhausting.
With that hose all done, I then started working on gluing it all in place. Before I could do the front, I needed to make a piece of trim for it to mount to. I also finally glued the large dowels to place and cut them flush on the inside. And to make sure they never popped out, I hit the inside surface with some contact cement and glued in some thin 2mm foam to hold everything. And from there, I started working on the lenses and their mounting hardware. I cut out several circles for the lens trim and beveled them around. And then using some masking tape, I was able to draw out the rest of the hardware around those lenses and began working on them using 5mm foam. With the right eye all glued on, I needed to make a small hose for it as well. This was the same thickness as the last hose, but this time instead of adding to it, I was cutting out little notches again, just like with the larger hoses. And then using my heat gun, I opened up those notches with a good old blast of hot air. And with that all opened up, I cut it to length, put it in its 2 mounting holes, and took the heat gun to it again to force it to the shape that I wanted. Before attaching it permanently, I also made trim for it as well, just like with the rest of the hoses. And last but not least, I grabbed some scrap paper and started drawing out the shape of the helmet's horn.
Arr. Looking pretty good so far. And the best thing is that I can wear my glasses with this thing. I can't so much see out of this hole because it's too far up, but I can definitely see out of this one, and I can see out of all of these. So that's pretty cool. Still a few small details left to do, mostly just small rivets and stuff. But right now, the biggest brainstorm is on this giant spike that will fit on the helmet like so. Right now I have 2 ways of doing this, because you can kind of see behind my wall of crap I have, it is a fairly thick spike. It's thick, but it's also oddly shaped. So it starts from the top point slightly off center, and then I was wrong on here, it actually ends about center line. So this would actually end around here. So it's going to kind of cock like that. And then on top of that, it is not an even uniform shape either. It has all kinds of weird structural things. So I have 2 ways to do this, because it is pretty wide. I measured it out with some scrap 10mm foam, and it would end up being, if I was to make the whole thing in one giant piece, as in solid, it would be 4 pieces of 10mm foam. It'd be about 40mm thick. That would get me exactly what I am there. Problem, that will be pretty heavy. Other option would be to make it hollow, and to do that, I would have to make a more or less handmade 3D model of this spike. Just getting this section here, that section here, and then kind of have it wrap around. It would be a lot lighter, but considering this shape and all the nicks and breaks in this spike, that would make that insanely difficult to get. Possible, but I probably couldn't get away with using 10mm foam. I'd have to use something thinner. It would really limit my ability to kind of carve and sand anything to get like that rough look to it. So right now I'm thinking 4 layers of 10mm. Now that said, the whole thing is not going to be all that. So weight wise, it probably won't be as heavy as I think it will be, because it's only 40mm thick at the base. By the time you get up here, you're just 1. About here you're probably 2, and then maybe here 3, and then 4. So the bulk of your weight is from here down. So I don't think it'll be too bad. Plus, with all the nicks taken out of this, that's also going to cut a lot of weight as well. The issue, at least right now, that I'm worried about. So right now the helmet is actually fairly well balanced. When I wear it, nothing falls forward or back. If I add all of this, regardless of which way I go, that might add a little bit more weight to the front and cause it to lean forward. How I will handle that, I've not decided yet. It depends on how big of an issue it becomes. If it does become an issue, I can either add a counterweight or something in here to not allow it to fall too far forward. That's a issue I have to deal with down the road after I do the spike. But yeah, helmet's going along pretty good. I'm fairly satisfied with it, even though I was worried about this the most out of the entire thing. But I'm happy so far. I mean, obviously not 100%, because I'm never happy when it comes to anything I build. For example, some of my nitpicking, this part here should have been just a hair wider. When I say a hair, I mean like 2mm. Like, I don't know, like 1/8 of an inch. Like that's how much, like I just want that little bit, and it bothers me. Reason being I need it to be that much is because there's a bolt that goes there, and I guess that's supposed to kind of like be like the hinge that it would then spin on. Now I can't really get a good bolt in there, and that is going to drive me crazy until the end of time, or until the end of the project at least. But can't focus on that too much, otherwise I will never get anything done. So I'll move forward, working on this bike next.
So I'd gone the route of laminating 4 sheets of 10mm foam together. I also added some small dowel rods in this as well, fitted in between the 2 center layers. It probably wasn't needed considering this was solid, but it didn't hurt to have it there anyway. That said, however, after gluing those 4 pieces together, I realized that 4 wasn't going to be enough because of the odd shape it has at its mounting point. I needed 3 more layers for a total of 7 layers of 10mm foam. And with that all glued together, I could finally start carving it to shape. I started with my silver marker, drawing out the major curves in the design to tackle first. This was going to take several passes to get right, so cue the montage.
All right, so the horn's finally attached. Actually, I kind of like it. It's very hard to get in camera. I was expecting this to be heavier than it is, but it's actually not that bad. Getting the scaling and everything right was, I'm not going to say tricky, because I more or less just used a ton of references, got an idea of how big everything is supposed to be. I want to say that the horn is almost exactly as tall as the helmet. I got the angle a little wrong. It's going to bother me for a while, but I think I might have already mentioned it, I can't remember. But it comes out right here, but this should have come out just a little bit. So it's off just a little. Oh well. So I tried it on with the chest piece and came to the conclusion that the helmet sits a little low. So I'm gonna have to add some padding to the top on the inside to raise it up on my head a little bit. Not that much. I determined about a finger's width is all I really need. So no big deal. What I'm gonna do is take some 10mm foam and then just kind of like lay it in there, add some extra, just enough to raise it up. That's all I'll need to do there. Doing that will solve a couple clearance issues as well, because with it just resting on my head as is, I hit this stuff here off of a lot of the gorget and stuff like that. Raising it up a little bit, it's going to help clear that a little bit. My movement or my mobility isn't going to be perfect. I'll be limited in terms of how far I can turn my head, but I can still see pretty good, and it's not going to hurt me too much. But yeah, so I got that to do, and then the only thing left to do I need is a couple small rivets, little doodads and stuff, and maybe some weathering then. Maybe carve out some scratches and battle damage, and that'll be about it. The only other thing to say about the horn is that getting the curve of the cut for it to mount was a little difficult. Sable, are you scratching my chair? Anytime she wants my attention, she scratches my chair. And this side didn't turn out as good as the other side. You can see there's a little bit of a seam there. It's kind of hard to see probably, where the glue's kind of pulling. I'll probably just fill that in with some foam clay or something in the end, then I just sand it off, sand it smooth. So, at most, maybe another hour's worth of work, just small stuff. As far as the lenses and the visors here, I'm gonna do that later, possibly after painting. Maybe not so much make them after painting, but I'll definitely install them after painting. I definitely can't get a good photo of it, but when I cut these out, I cut out like a recess on the inside for where the lens will actually fit into. That way I'm not putting them in the back or just in the front. They'll actually fit in the middle somewhere within the actual trimming on the inside, and it'll fit about halfway up inside. Kind of glue up in there. It's the same on both of them. I did this, but finding the right kind of lens that I need is going to be difficult, tricky. I'll probably just keep an eye out anytime I go to the store or something. I did buy some red clothing dye, so I can kind of dye the lenses when I do find what I need. I'll also have to trim them down 2 size, which won't be as hard as I'm thinking. If I was smart, I would have kept a template or a piece that I'd cut out and use it as like a jig to kind of get the proper size, but I can refigure it out anyway because these are super easy to access in the back here. So I'll just make up some foam or something like that, throw something in, trace it in paper, whatever. But until then, time to do some detailing, or more detailing. I don't know.
First bit of detailing I hit was with the hardware around the lenses on the visor. This included little rivets and bolts, a hose that goes from the small shutter to the large lens, and so on. To make the rivets to go around the trim of the visor, I dremeled out a really thin dowel from 5mm foam, and then cut it into thin slices, and then glued them all in place. For the box in the back was just another handful of small rivets, also cut from 5mm foam and sanded round. And from there, I started carving out the battle damage. Using my reference images from the game, I tried matching every scratch and chip that I could see. And from there, the last thing I needed to do was make the extra piece inside the helmet for fitment. I used a template piece I had saved for the top center and used that to make an insert needed to raise the helmet up. I also added a small bit to the front of that, which presses on my forehead. This little piece alone will help keep the helmet from falling forward. And with that all attached, it came time for one final test fit.
And there we have it. Scab Captain Helmet. We'll cover the finish and paint on this after we finish the rest of the armor, which means up next is more armor. To be specific, the pauldrons. So, see you in the next one.